think everything is on schedule for our enemies. And the reason I say that is I have greater respect for our enemies than most people. They think our enemies are just a bunch of left-wingers or radicals, a bunch of commies, and so then out there burning things and destroying things. They don't realize that it's much deeper than that. I've traveled around the sun 93 times now. I've seen politics in all of its glory. And there's one thing that is a clear takeaway for me, and that is that we've always been betrayed by politicians. They promise, and we're so hopeful. And then we get something, a little crumb here and a crumb there. Then the first thing you know, 4 years go by, 8 years go by, and all the crumbs are taken back, and we're worse off than we were. The communists have a phrase for that. The phrase is, we will come to total conquest by taking 2 steps forward and 1 step backward, and then 2 steps forward and 1 step backward. This is old Bolshevik strategy. The idea is that you have to convince your enemy that he's winning now and then, or that he's already won. And then the enemy lowers his guard. He said, oh, it's over. We've won. We can go back to watching Dancing with the Stars or something. And meanwhile, then consolidate their power. This is the Bolshevik strategy. And then I discovered it's more than just the Bolshevik strategy. It's kind of universal. I think that we have to understand who our enemy is. I don't think Americans really know. They think, well, it's those guys that are carrying a hammer and sickle. Of course, that was back in the 60s. Communism was the threat. I was very much involved in that. We were all concerned about communism taking over Russia and then China, and then we had Cuba on our doorstep, and half of South America was going communist, and so we were all anti-communists. We had to stop this. What we didn't realize at the time is that some of the people we were following here in America in an anti-communist crusade, they had the same belief structures, but they called themselves anti-communists. And it turned out that they were anti-communists. Let's face it, Hitler fought against Stalin. Okay, Hitler was a Nazi, Stalin was a communist. Why did they fight each other? Well, I found out later on when I was studying communism that the ideology of communism and the ideology of fascism and Nazism are exactly the same. And yet they fought each other, and hundreds of thousands of people gave their lives in this war. What's that all about? And then I began to finally realize that it was because they were fighting not over ideology or belief systems, but over territory. They wanted to be the chief cheese, and they wanted to be the dominant factor. And that's the way it's always been ever since I realized that most of the major powers of the world all believe the same thing, but they fight for dominance and they fight for territory. Some of the great empires in America that we cherished as American traditions, our institutions, our school system, our media, was becoming almost exactly like the communists that we were fighting against. And this is where I'm leading with that, because finally I came to the realization that it was the same, because what the enemy is something called collectivism. And these words, fascism, communism, socialism, Nazism, they're meaningless because they are essentially the same. And so they can fight each other, and we have to choose up sides, supposedly. No matter which side we choose, we wind up in the same place, maybe under a different set of names, but the ideology is the same. When we fought against communism and fascism in World War II, all throughout the war, we were becoming communist and fascist, and our leaders were saying so. They said, we have to get rid of the Constitution right now because you can't fight a tyranny unless you have a dictatorship. You can't wait around and get all these niceties worked out and worry about human rights and so forth. That was the argument that was made during the Civil War. You know, Abraham Lincoln said, no, let's suspend the Constitution. We have to win this war. And that's the trick about wars. In time of war, constitutional restraints are always given up. And what usually happens is they aren't returned afterwards, or some of them are. Now, having said that as background, what are we seeing today? In the name of fighting communism, we are abandoning the Constitution. Our president is doing things that are totally against the Constitution. And everybody is cheering it because we are the good guys and they are the bad guys. And let's not worry about constitutional restraints. What we are doing is we are creating and putting the final nail in this thing called collectivism, and it's in America. And it's almost indistinguishable from what was in the Soviet Union or Nazi Germany. We are building it here in the name of fighting tyranny. This scares the hell out of me. And I think people need to clear their minds and get rid of all these ideas that you can trust politicians because they say the right things and sometimes they do the right things. But usually what they do is that 1 step backwards so they can take 2 steps forward. And that's the way the world is going to hell in a handbasket, is with this strategy. So in general, that's why I am not so happy about all of the things that are going on. They sound good. We're getting rid of some very bad practices, but we're doing it in a totalitarian fashion. And we come out the other side as losers, I'm afraid. I want people to stop and think not only what we are doing, but how we are doing it. I'm afraid people don't know what they believe in. They don't have a philosophy, a political ideology of their own. And so we take a look at it, and most people in America are collectivists. They like the idea of welfare. They like the idea of powerful government making decisions on behalf of the people. They like technology now. They want to get rid of politicians because they're fed up with them, rightly so, but they're going to replace them with computers, they think. What they don't realize is the computers will always be programmed by people. And so the great leader, which was one of the characteristics of collectivist system, they always have the great leader, like Big Brother in the book 1984. All totalitarian systems have the great leader, whether it's Mussolini or Hitler or Mao Zedong or Stalin or whoever. But now the great leader is going to be the computer. It's going to be technology. And what behind the computer will be the programmers who put the data into the computer. And we'll think it was done by some kind of a godlike machine, when in fact it's just a facade, and the machine is controlled from the backside with dials and switches as usual. This is my, quote, pessimistic view, but I think it's a realistic view. And if I had a chance to give warning to people, it would be, wake up. Take a look a little deeper and see, what are we building in the name of fighting totalitarianism? I am afraid we are building totalitarianism. The executive orders, when they started to come into place, were simply to implement the laws of Congress. They were not to be the judgment of the president. The president was never intended to be a king. But the American people now have made the president a king. They want the man on the white horse. And you know what? They're going to get a king. We've undone the American Revolution. We've reversed the whole American tradition. We are in trouble, not because of the enemy, at least not because the enemy has invaded or tried to conquer us with guns and bayonets, but they are inside of our nation, and they're winning through psychological means and not military means. I think this is all part of a suede shoe program. They may not call it central bank digital currencies, but it will be a digital currency. It will be controlled by the central bank. It may be decentralized. It may be, even for a while, nationalized. Different countries will have different versions of it, but there'll be a clearinghouse so these digital things move around, from one to the other, and you can swap one for the other, so forth. But the end result, the thing that we do not want in these digital currencies, well, two things. First of all, it will not belong to us. That's the thing about central bank digital currencies. It's a digital monetary system, but the monetary system we have now, which is primarily digital, frankly, our credit cards and so forth, at least is ours. We can turn it into $100 bills, or we can turn it into gold or silver or something. We can stick it in a mattress, we can stick it in our pockets, and we can thumb our nose if we want to at the government. If we got some money, we can buy food, we can pay our rent and so forth. But when the money is not ours, and we can't collect it, can't put it in our hands, then they can turn the switch and we're out of purchasing power. We'll starve to death, and that's the ultimate control. That feature is what we should be looking at, not at what it's called, but will it function like that? And it will. I can see that as clear as possible. So all this talk about, don't worry, we're going to get rid of central bank digital currencies, and everybody says, hooray! They don't understand that's a lie. They'll get rid of it by name, but they will have it in essence. First of all, I like the idea of auditing the Fed because it's sort of a public relations move. It gets people thinking, well, they're going to audit the Fed. Well, there's something not fair going on. Why do they want to audit it? What's the big deal? So it's kind of a way of reaching into the subconscious mind of the population who doesn't even know what the Fed is in most cases. So in that sense, it's good PR. But I don't think we need to audit the Fed. We know what the Fed is doing. They tell us what they're doing. They're making money out of nothing, and they're ruining the economy. They're creating more money than are our goods and services. Inflation is out of control, and we're just beginning to see the final stages of that. And they're using it as control over people because they control interest rates and the sources of money, the supply of money, the speed of money turnover. If they can control money, as they do, they control every transaction we make in our lives between ourselves. So it's too much power in the hands of individuals. So the idea that it's our money, however, has always been pretty much an escape hatch for us. And when this final digital currency comes into play, it's going to declare that this is not our money, it belongs to the banks. And that's the key. In fact, it's already that way. I didn't realize that myself until fairly recently. There was something called the Frank Act, as I remember, and it declared that before we used to put money in the bank as a deposit, and it was our money. We could take it out anytime we want, supposedly. It was our money. But ever since the Frank Act, which is, a year and a half or 2 years ago, no, it's not our money money anymore. It's like we invested it in the bank. It's like we bought stocks and bonds or something. And it's their money. So if they fail, if the bank fails, too bad. It's not our money. It was their money. And we just have to share the losses with them. And that's what we're coming into. So the final step is to take it away from us completely. Then what can we do? If we're not good boys and girls and we say something against the establishment and they don't like us, they'll flip us off and we don't have any food or shelter or ways to move around. And we'll be sitting on the street with a tin cup, but nobody will have anything to put in the tin cup because there will be no coins, nothing in our pockets. So we die. I'm really concerned about this. Might sound really weird to somebody who hasn't been following this for all these years, but this is a trend that's been going on now for over 100 years. The international banking fraternity has always wanted a cashless society because cash in the pockets of citizens makes them pretty independent. And once you have cashless and they don't have something in their pockets, now they're 100% dependent. Well, we used to worry about the government, but now we find out that these banks are so powerful, they bought up all the politicians, or most of them, so that the government doesn't control the banks anymore. The banks control the government. Again, I'm getting back. I'm really concerned about this. While everybody is celebrating, we've won, we've won, we've won, they're not seeing that the trends are continuing exactly as they always have, except they've changed a little bit of color. They've changed slogans. They've changed names. They've changed mechanisms, but the goal and the substance of the whole thing has not changed one bit. It's a pretty important clue, and especially when you look at who the players are, the central banks and the large corporations. Everything we're talking about, this is no surprise to them. And they've been collecting gold for quite a while. China has been collecting gold and silver for several decades now, and that's a major player. And some of the big funds, they're even going into gold, as you probably know. So yeah, why are they doing that? It's because it'll be about the only independent measurement of value left, except you're standing with the banks. So if you want independence, you've got to have something that you control, something that you can put in your hand, something that you can put in a box and put in a vault, and then you're independent to some extent. But without that, you're somebody's servant. The dominoes are being replaced by something else. So the whole system, how it's going to react, will probably not be the same as in the past because we won't have money. We will have digits. And so I think that will change the pattern somehow. I'm not aware of any time in history when anything like this has happened. This is a new condition where money may not even exist except as decreed by the emperor, you know. The first form of money actually occurred in China. They started to inscribe pieces of white inside, they called it basque, as I remember, inside of tree trunks. And they would put their inscriptions and marks on it, and the people had to accept those little things as money, even though they didn't want to. But if you didn't, you lost your head. We may go back to something like that again, where we don't have money like we used to think of it. Not even the bark of a tree. It'll just be digits. You look at your smartphone, oh, it says 0. That's it. And how it will fall, it may not fall at all. It may be just a transition to this scenario in 1984. It's hard for me to imagine how this will work out. I think to some extent it depends on American people in particular, how passive they are on this. It seems to me most people, even those who are pretty well informed, are more concerned about, well, how is it going to happen? Or when is it going to happen? And how can I escape it? When they should be talking about, how do we stop it? Because once it happens, I don't know how it's going to happen or if it would ever be possible to reverse it.